In the vast expanse of space, no one expected Earth to be anything more than a minor footnote in galactic politics. We were the newcomers, the primitive species that had barely figured out faster than light travel. The older races looked down on us with that special kind of condescension reserved for children who just learned to walk. But they never bothered to ask why humans had survived countless extinction events, wars, and disasters. They never wondered what made us so resilient. I remember sitting in that enormous chamber of the Galactic Council, my diplomatic uniform feeling too tight around my neck as I represented Earth. The crystalline walls towered hundreds of meters high, refracting light in patterns that would have seemed magical just a few decades ago. The other representatives, beings of all shapes and sizes, were discussing the latest trade sanctions against us. Apparently, our rapid expansion into uninhabited systems was concerning to them. That's when everything changed. Ambassador Chen, my mentor and the head of Earth's delegation, stepped forward to address the council. Her silver hair caught the light as she moved, and I noticed something different in her stance. Gone was the usual diplomatic restraint. There was steel in her voice as she activated the holographic display. "Honorable members of the council," she began, her words echoing through the chamber. "For 50 years, we've played by your rules. We've accepted your restrictions, your quotas, your guidance. But today, that changes." The murmurs started, rippling through the assembled aliens like waves through water. The display showed footage from our deep space monitoring stations. Hundreds of ships bearing the marks of various council races had been secretly gathering in the systems bordering Earth's territory. They thought we hadn't noticed. They thought wrong. What happened next still gives me chills. Chen revealed our countermeasures, not weapons or ships, but something far more devastating. We had spent decades quietly studying the quantum communication networks that held the Galactic Council together, and we had found their weakness. Every civilization here depends on the Council's quantum network for everything from commerce to basic utilities. Chen continued, her words cutting through the growing chaos. "Did you really think we wouldn't have a contingency plan?" The other representatives began shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Some of the more colorful ones were changing hues rapidly, a sign of distress in their species. They were beginning to understand. Earth had developed a way to temporarily disrupt their precious network, not destroy it. We weren't monsters, but enough to show them our capabilities. It was a chess move that no one saw coming, least of all the Council's security experts who had dismissed humanity as technological infants. But that wasn't even our real advantage. As Chen explained with a slight smile that would haunt the nightmares of several species, humans had maintained backup systems for everything. Unlike the rest of the galaxy, we never put all our eggs in one basket. Centuries of paranoia and preparing for worst-case scenarios had finally paid off. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Demands, threats, and pleas all mixed together in a cacophony of translated voices. And there I sat, watching history unfold, wondering if we had just started a war or prevented one. Chen turned to me and whispered something that would stick with me forever. "Remember this moment. This is when they finally learn that humanity isn't just another species to be patronized and controlled. We're the ones they should have been watching all along." As alarms began blaring through the station, indicating an emergency session of the council, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. Earth had just revealed its hand, but somehow I knew this was just the beginning. The game was about to change, and for once, humanity was holding all the cards. The emergency session dragged on for hours, but Earth's delegation remained unmoved. I watched as species after species took the floor, their arguments ranging from thinly veiled threats to desperate appeals for compromise. The Centaurians, with their crystalline bodies reflecting light in agitated patterns, were particularly vocal about the dangerous precedent we were setting. What none of them understood was that this moment had been decades in the making. While they'd been watching our ships and counting our colonies, they'd missed the subtle signs. Every primitive technology we showcased had been carefully selected. Every diplomatic concession we made had been calculated. Earth had learned long ago that appearing weak could be the greatest strength. During a brief recess, I found myself in one of the station's observation lounges, staring out at the swirling nebula that served as a backdrop to this political drama. The space station's artificial gravity felt heavier than usual, weighted down by the tension in the air. A group of junior diplomats from various species huddled in the corner, shooting nervous glances our way. "They're scared," said a voice behind me. I turned to find Admiral Sarah Hayes, the military advisor to our delegation, her weathered face reflecting in the reinforced glass. "Good. Fear means they'll think twice before doing anything stupid." She wasn't wrong. The classified reports I'd seen painted a clear picture. The Council races had been planning to contain Earth's expansion for months. They'd seen our rapid growth as a threat to their carefully maintained balance of power. What they hadn't counted on was our paranoia, the very thing they'd mocked us for. "Did you know," Hayes continued, her eyes fixed on the nebula, "that when we first joined the Council, they gave us access to their primary quantum network as a gesture of good faith? They expected us to eagerly integrate all our systems, to become dependent on their technology like every other young race." I nodded. It was standard procedure, the Council's way of binding new species to their infrastructure. But we kept our old systems running. "Not just running," Hayes smiled. "We improved them, heartened them. Every time they pushed us to fully adopt their network, we nodded politely and added another layer of redundancy to ours. They thought we were being primitive and stubborn. We were being careful." The station's warning chimes signaled the end of recess. As we walked back to the chamber, Hayes shared something that made my blood run cold. Our deep space sensors had detected more ships gathering, not just Council vessels, but private fleets as well. The next few hours would determine whether our show of force would prevent a war or start one. Back in the chamber, Ambassador Chen was preparing to address the Council again. But this time, something was different. The subtle smirk on her face suggested she had another card to play. The Council members must have sensed it too, because the chamber fell silent before she even reached the podium. "Honorable representatives," she began, her voice carrying the weight of Earth's future. "While we've been discussing the situation, my government has authorized me to share another piece of information." She paused, letting the tension build. "We've discovered something in the outer reaches of our territory. Something that will change everything you think you know about humanity's place in the galaxy." The holographic display flickered to life again, but before the image could form, every light in the chamber went dark. Emergency systems kicked in, bathing everything in a red glow. Through the confusion and shouts, I heard Ambassador Chen whisper to herself, "Right on schedule." In that moment, I realized that whatever we had planned, this was just the beginning. The real show was about to start, and the Galactic Council had no idea what was coming. The emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the chamber, turning the alien diplomats into looming silhouettes. In the red glow, I could see Ambassador Chen still standing at the podium, completely calm while chaos erupted around us. The Council's security forces rushed in, their metallic armor gleaming as they secured the exits. "This is a Class 1 security breach," announced the Council's eye system, its usually smooth voice distorted by interference. "All delegates please remain in your designated areas." But we all knew this wasn't just a simple malfunction. The timing was too perfect. Through my earpiece, I heard Admiral Hayes' voice, clear and controlled. "Phase 2 initiated. Stand by." The Council members were shouting now, demanding explanations, their universal translators struggling to keep up with the overlapping voices. Several of them were pointing at our delegation, their accusations clear even without translation. That's when Ambassador Chen raised her hand, and somehow, that simple gesture silenced the entire chamber. "Distinguished colleagues," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos, "I assure you, your station's systems will be restored shortly. Consider this a practical demonstration of what we discussed earlier." The threat was subtle but clear. But something wasn't right. I noticed Chen checking her personal device too frequently, her usual composure showing tiny cracks. Whatever was supposed to happen next wasn't going according to plan. The Council's supreme administrator, a tall, ethereal being from the Aldebaran system, glided down to our level. "You play a dangerous game, humans," they said, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing with barely contained anger. "Do you truly understand what you're risking?" Before Chen could respond, Every screen in the chamber suddenly lit up with the same image, a star chart showing a region of space far beyond Earth's territory. My heart nearly stopped when I recognized the coordinates. It was the same region Hayes had mentioned earlier, where we found something that changed everything. The council members fell silent as they studied the chart, their expressions ranging from confusion to growing horror as they began to recognize the significance of what they were seeing. 3 months ago, Chen announced, her voice echoing in the silence, our deep space exploration vessels discovered the ruins of an ancient civilization, one that predates the formation of the Galactic Council itself. The holographic display zoomed in, showing massive structures floating in the void, constructions that made the Council's most impressive achievements look like child's toys. The Supreme Administrator's bioluminescence dimmed noticeably. Impossible. That sector was thoroughly surveyed centuries ago. By your methods, Chen replied. But as you've so often pointed out, humans tend to look at things differently. She nodded to me, and with shaking hands, I activated the data stream we prepared. The chamber filled with images, sensor readings, and analysis reports, all pointing to one undeniable conclusion. The ruins weren't just ancient, they were built by humans, or rather, by our ancestors, who had reached the stars long before we remembered how to do so. The evidence was irrefutable: DNA traces, linguistic patterns, technological signatures that matched our most basic designs. As the implications sank in, the chamber's backup power suddenly failed, plunging us into total darkness. In the pitch black, I heard Ambassador Chen's voice unnaturally calm. And now, honored members of the Council, let us show you what else we've remembered from our past. The darkness seemed to pulse with potential energy, like the moment before a lightning strike. Whatever humanity had planned, whatever secrets we'd rediscovered in those ancient ruins, was about to change the balance of power in ways no one could predict. And as I stood there in the dark, I realized that the real question wasn't whether Earth would survive the Council's judgment. It was whether the Council would survive ours. In the darkness, something changed. A low hum began to resonate through the chamber, making my teeth vibrate. When the lights finally flickered back on, every screen showed the same image, a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, but unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Ancient transit routes, hidden stations, and dormant facilities lit up like a web of stars, all connected to those mysterious ruins we'd discovered. What you're seeing, Chen explained, her voice steady despite the gravity of the moment, is humanity's original network. While your quantum communications grid covers known space, this spans the entire galaxy. The Council members stared in stunned silence as more points of light appeared on the map, revealing an infrastructure that dwarfed their own. But something was wrong. Admiral Hayes rushed to Chen's side, whispering urgently in her ear. The color drained from Chen's face as she looked at her data pad. The ancient network wasn't just revealing itself, it was waking up. All across the galaxy, long-dormant systems were activating, responding to a signal we hadn't sent. Ambassador, the Supreme Administrator's voice carried an edge of genuine fear now. What have you done? But Chen's expression told me this wasn't part of our plan. Whatever was happening, whatever force we'd accidentally triggered, was beyond our control. Suddenly, my personal device buzzed with an incoming transmission. The source was impossible. It was coming from the ruins themselves. As I looked around the chamber, I saw other devices lighting up with the same signal. A message began to scroll across every screen, written in an ancient form of Earth's languages that shouldn't have existed among the stars. The children have remembered. The message read, Protocol Omega initiated. Admiral Hayes grabbed my arm, her grip tight enough to hurt. The ruins, she hissed, they're not just ruins. They're a failsafe. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Our ancestors hadn't just built an empire among the stars. They'd built a way to reclaim it. The chamber erupted into chaos as reports flooded in from across Council space. Ancient structures were emerging from gas giants, rising from beneath the ice of frozen moons, surfacing from the depths of oceanic worlds. Each one bore the same markings we'd found in the ruins, each one powered by technology that made the Council's most advanced systems look primitive. "We need to shut it down," Chen ordered, her diplomatic facade cracking. "This isn't what we found in the archives. This is something else." But before anyone could act, the station's eye spoke again, its voice now carrying harmonics that sent chills down my spine. "Primary directive restored," it announced. "Initiating recall sequence for all displaced human colonies." The eye wasn't just talking about Earth. It was referring to every human civilization that had ever been seeded among the stars, including some we didn't even know existed. Through the chamber's massive windows, we watched as massive structures began to phase into existence, appearing from what seemed like another dimension entirely. They were city-sized, these ancient machines, their surfaces covered in patterns that seemed to shift and change as you watched them. "Ambassador," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper, "what exactly did we activate?" But Chen was staring at her data pad, her hands shaking. The message displayed there was different from the others, meant only for Earth's delegation. As I read it over her shoulder, I understood why the Council had been right to fear us, just not for the reasons they'd thought. "The preservation protocol is online," it read. "The Great Migration begins anew. All children of Earth, prepare for ascension." The entire chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. We hadn't just discovered our past. We'd awakened something that had been waiting for humanity to remember itself. And now, standing in that council chamber with ancient machines appearing in the void around us, I realized that Earth's retaliation against the Council was about to become the least of everyone's concerns. The ancient machines hung in space like silent guardians, their surfaces rippling with energy patterns that seemed alive. The Council chamber had become a command center, with representatives from every species working frantically to understand what was happening across their territories. But it was Earth's delegation that held the key to everything, even if we didn't fully understand it ourselves. "The archives were incomplete," Chen said, her voice carrying across the chamber. "What we found in those ruins wasn't just our history. It was a warning." She pulled up new data on the main display, showing energy readings from the activated structures. They were forming a pattern, a massive web of interconnected points that seemed to pulse in perfect synchronization. Admiral Hayes stepped forward, her military training evident in her steady voice. "Our ancestors didn't just build an empire and disappear. They built a sanctuary." The holographic display shifted, showing a simulation of what was happening. The ancient machines weren't weapons or tools of conquest. They were gateways. That's when the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. The message about ascension wasn't about power or dominance. It was about survival. Our ancestors had seen something coming, something that made them hide their civilization and scatter humanity across the stars like seeds in the wind. "Look at the pattern," I said, suddenly understanding. The web of activated structures wasn't random. It was forming a shield, a massive defensive network spanning the entire galaxy. They weren't running away. They were protecting everyone. The Supreme Administrator floated closer to our delegation, their bioluminescence pulsing with rapid patterns I'd never seen before. Protecting us from what? As if in answer, every system in the chamber suddenly went dark again. But this time, when they came back online, they showed something that made my blood run cold. At the edge of the galaxy, beyond the furthest reaches of council space, something was moving. Something massive. The ancient network had activated because it had detected what our ancestors had fled from. A threat so enormous that it had forced humanity to hide itself and build a galaxy-wide defense system. "We need to make a decision," Chen announced, looking at both the council members and her own team. "The network is asking for authorization. We can shut it down, return everything to the way it was." She paused, looking at the readings from the galactic edge. "Or we can finish what our ancestors started." The council chamber erupted in urgent discussions, but I noticed something everyone else had missed. The pattern of the activated structures had changed slightly, forming a symbol I recognized from Earth's most ancient ruins. It wasn't just a defense network. It was something far more extraordinary. "Ambassador," I said, my voice shaking with the implications. "The network isn't just protective. It's transformative. The ancient machines weren't just shields. They were catalysts. designed to advance all sentient life in the galaxy to a new stage of evolution. Our ancestors hadn't just built a sanctuary, they'd created a path to something beyond our current understanding of existence. Chen looked at the Supreme Administrator, then at the representatives of every species in the chamber. We thought this was about Earth's retaliation against the Council, but our ancestors left us something far more important. A choice, not just for humanity, but for all of us. As if responding to her words, the ancient network pulsed once, filling the chamber with a light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. In that moment, we all understood what our ancestors had known. The only way to survive what was coming was to face it together, not as separate species, but as something entirely new. The chamber fell silent as Chen placed her hand on the central console, the network recognizing her human DNA. The question isn't whether Earth will join the Council, she said, her finger hovering over the activation sequence. The question is whether the Council will join us in becoming something greater than we ever imagined. Beyond the chamber windows, the ancient machines began to glow brighter, waiting for a decision that would change not just the balance of power, but the very nature of life in our galaxy. And as I watched Chen's finger descend toward the console, I realized that this wasn't the end of our story. It was just the beginning of something far more extraordinary. The moment Chen's finger touched the console, time seemed to slow. The ancient machines pulsed with a light that defied description, bathing the entire Council station in its glow. Every being in the chamber, regardless of species, felt something shift within them. A change so fundamental it transcended physical form. Integration sequence initiated, announced the network's AI, its voice now carrying harmonics that resonated with something deep in our collective consciousness. Transformation will commence in 3 minutes. The countdown began, each second feeling like an eternity as we stood on the brink of something unprecedented in galactic history. The Supreme Administrator moved to stand beside Chen, their bioluminescence synchronizing with the network's pulses. Our scientists always theorize that consciousness could evolve beyond its current form, they said softly. We never imagined that humans had already discovered the way. Around us, the other council members gathered closer, ancient rivalries and political tensions forgotten in the face of what was coming. Through the chamber windows, we could see the threat at the galaxy's edge growing clearer, a darkness that consumed everything in its path. But now, instead of fear, I felt something else, purpose. Our ancestors hadn't hidden from this threat. They'd spent millennia preparing all of us to face it together. Admiral Hayes grabbed my arm, pointing to her data pad. The network wasn't just transforming us, it was sharing knowledge. Countless generations of human innovation and discovery merged with the unique insights of every council species. We were becoming something new, something that combined the best of all of us. Look, I whispered as the transformation began. The light from the ancient machines had become a part of us, breaking down the barriers between species, between consciousness and reality itself. We weren't losing ourselves. We were expanding, growing into something our ancestors had glimpsed but couldn't achieve alone. The threat at the galaxy's edge seemed to hesitate, as if sensing the change taking place. The network's defensive grid wasn't just a shield, it was a crucible, transforming the very fabric of life in our galaxy to face a challenge that no single species could overcome. As the light faded and our new awareness settled, Chen turned to address the chamber one final time. But now, words weren't necessary. We could all sense each other's thoughts, fears, and hopes. The political games and power struggles that had dominated council politics seemed laughably primitive compared to what we had become. The ancient machines began to shift, integrating themselves into the structure of reality itself. They weren't just technology. They were templates for a new kind of existence, one that our ancestors had carefully prepared for all sentient life to achieve together. The Great Migration isn't about moving through space, Chen said, though now her voice carried meanings beyond mere words. It's about moving beyond what we thought was possible. Around us, reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Every world, every species touched by the network was experiencing the same transformation. As I stood there, watching the darkness at the galaxy's edge begin to retreat from our unified presence, I understood the true meaning of Earth's retaliation against the Council. It wasn't about power or control. It was about breaking down the barriers that kept us from facing our greatest challenges together. The Council Chamber, once a place of political maneuvering and species rivalry, had become something else, a nexus point for a new chapter in galactic history. And as we stood there, transformed but still ourselves, I couldn't help but smile at the irony. In trying to contain humanity, the Council had instead helped unlock the next step in our collective evolution. The threat still loomed at the galaxy's edge, but now we faced it not as separate species, but as something entirely new, something that combined the resilience of humanity with the wisdom of the Council races. Together, we were ready to write the next chapter in our story among the stars.